Hi everyone, Woody Paints Minis here, and today I'm going to do a tutorial on Desert Basin. So as you can see then, we've used a little bit of cork, we've used some technical paint and some tufts. So first thing we want to do then is that we want to put our base onto the Citadel painting handle and we want to base coat it. Any colour will do. For this tutorial I've done it in Abaddon Black. So we just want to thin those paints out, as you can see in my wet palette here. We just want to add a little bit of water and get it to a thin, milky texture, just like you would for when you're painting your minis. We just apply that to the top of the base then, and between each stage what I've actually done is I've started to use a hairdryer. The hairdryer just helps speeding up the drying time, allowing me to get through these bases a bit quicker than what I would usually do. The next stage then is to add some rocks. The rocks really set off the base and really add some detail to the mini when it's complete. What I've got there then is a bit of Loctite super glue, and I just apply it to a flat surface. It's important it is a flat surface to make sure it adheres to the base best it can. Now a good tip here then is to eliminate any straight edges on this corking. A nice rough texture makes it look a bit more natural. So I'm just holding it down for a couple of seconds there then. And then as I said before then, I'll be hitting that with a hairdryer just to heat that up and make the glue stick. What you can do with this cork then is to start cutting into the sides of it and just to create a little bit of height and a bit of unevenness. Just bear in mind though that your feet of the model will actually have to be anchored to this, and what you can do is you can use a paper clip and a small drill just to drill through the bottom of the base and to anchor that model down if you need to. It's particularly good to do that with dreadnoughts and large models like that. So next phase then is that I go on to the technical Martian ironearth, and once again then I thin this down with a bit of water. Obviously because it's a technical paint, if I don't thin it down it will start to crack in as soon as it starts to dry. So I'll thin this down into a milky consistency and I'll paint those rocks. Now it's not the end of the world if we miss a few little bits, because after this there's a few more stages, a few more colours and a final wash to do, which will fill in those recesses that I may have missed. This may take one or two coats just to cover these rocks in a nice coat. Don't worry about spilling the paint off of the rocks onto the normal base, it's absolutely fine. We will be going over the next stage and covering that with the thick technical paint ready to create that cracking that we see in a desert terrain. Now one thing with the brushes that I'm just using here then, I obviously don't want to use my best fine detail brushes, so these are just cheap brushes that you can get from any kind of DIY kind of art stores. Next then I take a horrible ruined scrappy brush, just something a little bit thicker that I don't mind getting clogged up with that technical paint, and I'll reach back into my technical Martian ironearth paint, and now I'll stick big thick blobs in various areas. I'm just doing this very rough. I'm just trying to avoid any overlap onto the actual rocks that I've just done, so the cork that we've glued down. It's not the end of the world if we do get any on, and if you want to remove that as well, you can water on a brush and kind of water it down directly on that model. So from this page I've just decided that actually I want it a little bit more thicker, and my brush is kind of creating a bit of a mess up the rock. So what I've done is I've just taken this this metal tool that I've got here. It's actually a Halloween pumpkin carving tool, but it's absolutely ideal. It's got a bit of a spatula end, and I'll just scoop around and I'll apply it a lot thicker in some areas rather than others. Bit of inconsistency will really create a different texture and different levels to this base. And as you can see, you can be quite precise with kind of spreading this around in the little crevices. So here's the finished product then. Obviously I've used that hairdryer just to dry this quicker for the purposes of this tutorial. But the next thing then is I'll reach for my riser rust and we'll start to dry brush this. Obviously, as everybody knows then, with dry brushing, you want to make sure that the brush is kind of wiped onto a piece of paper or a cloth, just getting a lot of that paint off of that brush and just drag it over the areas that you want that kind of highlight to be on. So the upper surfaces, any corners, and it'll just help make that base look really nice. So the next stage then is that we'll move on to a second dry brush, and that will be a lighter colour. So this will simulate the light just hitting those corners and reflecting in various areas. So what I've used here then is Tyrant Skull. And once again, I'll just apply it to the edges. You want to be a little bit more conservative with this colour if you want it more red. If you don't want it more red and you're looking for that kind of that lighter desert base, you want to be using it a little bit more heavy. But it might be best just to use a couple of passes over with that dry brushing. This will really set off that final base and give it that really nice dry look. Don't be afraid to overdo it. If we do think that we've gone a bit too far with this second highlight, what we can do is we can just go straight back to the first one, which was the riser rust, and we can re-dry brush it and bring it back out like that. You could add multiple colours here if you want a bit more depth, but I've balanced this with how it looks and also the speed that I can kind of do these bases at. Next then is the wash. So what I've done here then is I've used Serapin Sepia, which is my go-to for any of my bases. It's a really nice colour. It's a tone below Anthrax Earthshade. And I'll just coat this absolutely everywhere. Don't be afraid to overdo it because you can obviously use a dry brush and suck a bit of that puddling out if you need to. But this will seep into the crevices and give it that really effective kind of shadow appearance to it. If you do think when you're applying this that you've actually gone a bit too much with it and you want it a lighter tone, what you can do is you can just wet your brush and you can just run over those rocks or certain patches on the model that you want to thin down. There we go. And as you can see, it's really starting to pop now. Now, once that's dry, what I'll do then is I'll just go over with a final dry brush and I'll just be a little bit more cautious on where I put this. And once again, it's Tyrant Skull, and I'll just aim for the very edges. And all this will do is this will put a bit of the light back into the base, which we darkened down with the Serapin Sepia. And now for the final stage, what we'll do is we'll add our tufts to the base just to finish everything off. So as you can see, I've got several different colours of tufts. And the third colour is actually our bright red Alien Fire 6mm ones from Gamer's Grass. It's really good to have a different tone with this grass and it'll really set off the final piece. So I'll just pop in a little bit of super glue into the areas where I want to glue these down. So I'll grab a spatula tool then. And using the tool, what I'll do is I'll just place the tuft directly onto the super glue. Don't worry if it's not perfect first time. We'll use the end of our tool just to poke it in the hole and to make sure that we've got good contact with that super glue. Just pay a little bit of attention when you are pushing this down. What you don't want is for all of those strands of the grass all getting clogged up and glued together. So you want to use a sharp edge. You just want to poke it in just to make sure that we're kind of spiking it back up. Now, as you can see there, then there's a little hole. The cracking paint hasn't gone as well as I thought initially. And I'm just going to cover up that imperfection with a tuft. and it's a lot easier than having to repaint and then to re-dry brush. So I've just placed another tone, I think this is the dark green one, and I've just placed that next to the burnt umber. Now what I'm doing here then is just adding a bit of that alien fire tuft, just the third colour that I've chosen, and it will contrast well with the burnt umber and the dark green. Now I'm purposely putting this at the opposite side. Again, there I'm just spiking up those strands, just making sure that I haven't created any clumps glued to that base. I'm just going to put a final one deep in this little crack here. So just to finish off then, we'll just touch up the base rim with a little bit of Abaddon Black. Just make sure you do water this down, because if you don't, you'll have some brush strokes that'll be quite visible to the model. And there we have it. Our desert base is now complete, and we're ready to place the model onto it. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you've learned something. And if you like what I'm doing here, please like and subscribe to see some future content. To see more of my work, please check out my Instagram. The link will be in the descriptions. Thanks, guys.